It was Iraq. This time it's Afghanistan. The website has disclosed over 90,000 classified military documents, suggesting the reality on the ground may be worse than what's been officially reported. The leaks have been met with surprise, dismay, denial and anger, although some say it has revealed nothing new. Nevertheless, it could have an impact on the evolving US strategy in Afghanistan. Let's begin with this report from James Bays in Kabul.
The bodies of civilians being buried in Helmand. The Afghan government say up to 52 people died here in what President Karzai has called a morally unacceptable attack carried out by NATO. The Afghan leader's criticism will be deeply damaging to the international military mission here, reinforcing claims that the military has in the past consistently underreported the number of civilian casualties it causes. That's one of the conclusions being drawn from more than 90,000 US military records spanning 6 years from 2004, leaked to the internet-based whistleblower site WikiLeaks. It is an unprecedented leak, a huge volume of material with amazing detail about the conduct of this war. The release of the documents caused great surprise to the authorities in Kabul.
We were shocked by the fact that a huge number of documents were leaked. That was a shocking news. But so far as the substance of these leaked documents were, the president's immediate reaction was that most of this is not new. Most of this is what has been discussed in the past, and most of this is what we have always raised with our international partners.
The raw intelligence and threat assessments contained the suggestion that Pakistan, officially the United States ally, allows its secret service, the ISI, to meet directly with the Taliban. Their meetings appear to focus on organizing groups of men to fight against American soldiers and even assassinate Afghan leaders. Reports document a meeting between the former head of the ISI, Hamid, and senior Afghan fighters in South Waziristan in early 2009, in which plans to attack US-led forces were discussed. It's a report Hamid denies, saying it's intended to tarnish his and Pakistan's image.
Now this is ridiculous because on one side they are asking that without Pakistan's help we cannot win. On the other, they want to really wickedly indict Pakistan. I think this is all aimed at one thing, Pakistan bashing.
Pakistan has often been accused of supporting the Taliban in Afghanistan. The leaked reports will only add weight to those claims.
It's not a big surprise when it comes to the Pakistani support to the insurgents in Afghanistan. We Afghans have been talking about it for quite a long time. Even President Karzai raised this issue several times with US and Pakistani officials as well. But unfortunately, we never had any positive feedback from the United States.
The documents also reveal US Special Forces have formed a secret unit called Task Force 373 with the aim of capturing or killing leading Taliban and Al-Qaeda fighters.
Roger, solid copy.
The leaked reports also suggest the Taliban has heat-seeking surface-to-air missiles capable of shooting down aircraft. This is almost certainly the largest leak of military information in history. Journalists and researchers will scour through the data for months to come. There are bound to be fresh revelations and new questions about the effect and the effectiveness of the US and NATO military presence in this country. James Bays, Al Jazeera, Kabul.
Well, joining us now to discuss the topic are our guests. In Washington, D.C., Richard Weitz. He's the director of the Center for Political Military Analysis at the Hudson Institute. In Kabul, Shukriya Barakzai. She's a member of the Afghan Parliament. And in Islamabad, Zaid Hamid. He's the head of the defense and security think tank, Brass Tacks. Let's begin in Washington. Richard Weitz, certainly the mass of detail put into public views unprecedented. But in the information that has been looked at to date, is there really anything new in it?
No, that's a function of what actually has been released. It's not like the Pentagon Papers, for example, which was a release of a secret history of the war, which included the most sensitive documents that actually provided a narrative and showed that what was happening was different from than what had been said at the time of the administration. This is just a series of field reports, mostly, and comments by paid informers saying, well, I heard that this and this happened, or I saw this. And there's not anything there we didn't really know. We knew that there was a lot of civilian casualties. We knew the fighting was hard. We knew that there are all sorts of rumors that the Pakistan ISI is helping, or elements of it are helping elements of the Taliban. People now have had a chance to look it over for a couple of days. The reaction is there's not really anything new there, other than the fact that it is an interesting, large release of documents.
Well, Shukriya Barakzai in Kabul, is there anything within the information that you've read so far that you did not know?
Well, to be honest and to be frank, I'm not really surprised by that document, because these issues have been raised many times through to the Afghan government and from the people, which is they are living at the grassroots. They always was unhappy from the numbers of casualties, and at the meantime, the lack of proper media coverage from those casualties, which has happened since 9 years in Afghanistan, was another issue, because some places are under controlling of the Taliban, which is nobody can go and make a report about it, how life is under their control. And during the war, nobody can make a report it, because journalists are not allowed, and there are lots of security issues as well. I'm not really surprised by the number of casualties. This is the sad stories which is repeating time to time in Afghanistan. But yes, I'm glad for at least the international community, in particular United States, got the information about the double policy from the Pakistan, which is the Pakistan intelligence service never was loyal and honest against war and terror. Purposely, strategically, and wantedly, they keep some areas to be unsecure, and they send those unsecure areas gangster back to Afghanistan with the name of Taliban, which is they are today a big troublemaker for the Afghan people and somehow for Pakistani people too.
Zaid Hamid in Islamabad, your view of what's just been said there, that this information apparently confirming some form of Pakistani-based links with the conflict in Afghanistan?
This information confirms nothing. Let me first clarify that what this information actually is classified into is, in simple language, is called street gossip. The fact is that this is raw information, raw source reports. Often on many documents it is written that this has come from paid informers with credibility and information reliability is doubtful, and no operational strategy can be built. These are footnotes given almost on so many of the documents there. And the fact is, out of 92,000 documents released, less than 180 mention ISI in passing remarks, and even less than 30 or almost 30 some put some kind of allegation on ISI with the, as we said, with the footnotes that these are uncorroborated, unconfirmed information which cannot be turned into an operational strategy. Now, there are 2 or 3 points which come out very clearly from this leak. Is number one is the catastrophic failure of the US intelligence service. If the US intelligence service cannot protect its own classified archive, this is precisely the reason why the US is losing in Afghanistan. To say that US and NATO have lost in Afghanistan because of ISI would be barking up the wrong tree, would be a total, absolute, colossal misjudgment, misanalysis, wrong analysis of the situation in Afghanistan. And precisely because of these reasons, precisely because of blaming Pakistan for the internal failures of the Kabul regime, internal corruption and collapse of the Kabul administration, Mr. Karzai is called the mayor of Kabul for the very incompetent and corrupt government and regime that he heads. And if he is constantly blaming Pakistan, if Pakistan had to disrupt Afghanistan, if Pakistan had to attack Americans and NATO, Pakistan didn't have to go to elaborate mechanisms to orchestrate covert operations inside Afghanistan.
Hamid, I'll just interrupt you there, if I may, because I will come back to that particular point in a short while about the specifics. But I'd like to go to Richard Weiss in Washington again and pick up a point that was made there. These are source reports. They are coming from operatives or paid informers in the field. Now, it is interesting that the Pentagon comment on this information released is that it could take days, if not weeks, to go through this information. Now, one would assume, as it is US-sourced material, military classified material, that the information people would have already been through this documentation as it came through over the years that it has been being received. Would this be the correct assumption, Richard Weiss?
No, how it works is you end up with hundreds of thousands of these kind of reports, and there are various levels, starting with the people in the field and going up the ranks who screen out the material that looks of dubious correctness and is not seen to be accurate. And what this does remind me of, if anything, is the kind of intelligence that was released before the invasion of Iraq by the United States and Britain. It looked like the same kind of report. So-and-so saw a person from Al-Qaeda and a person representing the Iraqi government meeting in Prague, and they looked like they were conspiring over something. And that information was not made it into the intelligence assessment for the same reason. It's just uncorroborated. These people have their own agendas, and you don't want to make policy on that basis. So what they're going to do now is look through the material that's been released, because it's changed in context, and see if it tells, perhaps reveals what a source was, and that person then needs to be protected, or reveals a battlefield weakness that then needs to be corrected. That's what they're going to have to do. But at the time when they got it, most of this material was not worth assessing or passing up.
Well, Shukriya Barakzai in Kabul, to move on to that point that had been brought up in the beginning, the issue that has been highlighted here is the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and certainly from the Afghanistan side, the government has said that there is nothing in this information that it disagrees with. In other words, that it does believe that there is some form of outside involvement. Your view?
Before coming to your point, I just want to mention a few things. Number one, this is not Kabul regime. I believe, as an Afghan, Hamid Karzai is the elected legitimate president of Afghanistan. And today the security issues, I hope if the President Zardari or Zardari regime can control overall Pakistan, rather than that to sending and making issues from Pakistan back to Afghanistan. The relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan was not really good between the governments, not between the nations. Between the nations, always there was a strong commitment and lots of similarity and shared values. But between the governments, because the government of Pakistan is always leading by their security services and by their force, by their Fauj in Pakistani term. So therefore, their policy will never leave any non-militant government to be implemented and to be exist. And the relation between Afghanistan and Pakistan was have lots of up and down. It was always like a zigzag policy, because once upon a time, even when the President Musharraf was the president of the Pakistan, General Musharraf, Karzai always used the brother word to him. Although we were suffering at that time and nation was blaming the Karzai, why you're using the brother word for you enemy, or the enemy of the people of Afghanistan. But the relation always, because we don't have choice to change our border. We have to work together for prosperity, for security, and for having at least peaceful Afghanistan and peaceful being in the region, to living together. But these kind of reports may never damage, because that was long ago. The government of Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan, by proper document, which is they share to the international community that our Pakistani friends are not loyal and honest with us, because they believe as long as war goes to be continued in Afghanistan, that long they are receiving a quite white check or blank check from the United States. Since 2001 till 2010, the most profit politically, strategically, and economically, Pakistan got profit from the war back in Afghanistan, exactly like it was during the Mujahideen time. But there's a question between United States relation back with Pakistan. Is the United States still want to rely on Pakistan as a good partner, or no, they have to think double about it?
Well,
Which
some may argue, if I could just interrupt you there,
honest
Shukriya Barakzai, some have argued that the information that has been made public may give ammunition for some in the US to put more pressure to bear on Pakistan to take greater action, particularly in the tribal areas along the border with Afghanistan. What's your view of that particular viewpoint, Zaid Hamid?
You see, one thing that you need to understand is that Pakistan itself is facing a massive insurgency within its own borders. Pakistan army is fighting a high-intensity conflict within mainland Pakistan. And almost 20,000 Pakistanis have died in the last few years from terrorism, suicide bombings. Now, who's doing that? This attack, this war against Pakistan is getting funds, equipment, weapons and explosives not by ISI, not by Pakistan, but from Afghanistan. And the issue has been raised many times between Pakistan and the United States and the Afghanistan within the strategic dialogue also. And the fact of the matter is that Pakistan does not have the time, the capacity and the will at this moment to open new battlefronts. Pakistan does not want to fight a war for the Americans inside Afghanistan. Why should Pakistan declare a war on Afghan Taliban, Haqqani and Hikmatyar when those groups are fighting the Americans to liberate their homeland and not waging a war against Pakistan? But that does not mean Pakistan is supporting these elements. Pakistan is already hands full with the gifts that have come into Pakistan from Afghanistan. And this is what the Pakistani grievance is. Our friends in Kabul would like to explain who is waging this war inside Pakistan. Where are they getting the money and weapons and explosives from? Is ISI doing it? Or some elements in Afghanistan backed by Indian RAW and the Kabul government are backing them up?
Well, let's be very specific, if I may interrupt you, Zaid Hamid. Let's be very specific. One of the reports in the details released has a former ISI head, Hamid Gul, meeting groups in South Waziristan in January 2009, allegedly plotting attacks across that border into Afghanistan, which would give credence to those who've argued that that border has been used for access into Afghanistan. Your response to that?
You see, one thing you should remember is that General Hamid Gul is a celebrated Pakistani patriot. And every movement that he does is very carefully monitored. It's monitored by the state, it's monitored by the media, it's monitored by the public. And there cannot be more nonsensical allegation than this one. Because the tribal areas of Pakistan are also the most heavily monitored area through satellites, through drones. And for General Hamid Gul, like celebrity, to go into South Waziristan to orchestrate a war strategy planning is the most utter nonsense. Like these reports also say that Pakistan Army tried to poison the US Army beer supply, as if Pakistan Army supplies beer to the American Army, or control the food supply to the American, the NATO forces. So these kind of nonsensical allegations. And the fact is, you see, I was myself a resistance fighter against the Soviets during the 80s. I fought alongside the Afghan resistance. And to wage any kind of resistance, you need three basic elements. One, the base area where the training camps take place. Number two are the weapon supplies and explosives and ammunition which go into the country to fight. And third, the supply stream of fighters to go in. In the last 10 years, not a single proof has been given or any allegations put against the ISI or the army that Pakistan Army is running training camps in the tribal areas, or weapon supplies or trucks or ammunitions are going into Afghanistan.
Well, the point is made there. Let's just move on at this particular point and just step back a little bit and look at the US domestic impact. The American people have had scant access to full details of the war in Afghanistan, and the release of the WikiLeaks documents, regardless of accuracy, has provided a snapshot of the realities on the ground previously not made public. Confidence in Obama's war effort appears to have been sliding, and the pressure to defend his military strategy is now greater than ever. Critics seeking evidence that the additional deployment of 100,000 troops and an increased use of special operational forces to disrupt the Taliban and al-Qaeda is working. The White House has dismissed the leaked documents as old news. Obama, they say, information that they say Obama was fully aware of when implementing his new war strategy. But the apparent rush to pass a critical war finance bill in Congress hints at an administration that is under mounting pressure. Well, Obama's review of the war effort is due at the end of the year. And Richard Weitz in Washington, is this release of information going to impact on his ability to maintain the support of Congress and the public as a whole throughout this period, not only in the short term, but in this medium term as well?
At the moment, the documents themselves don't appear to be having much of an impact. The way they're structured, as I said, it's not like the Pentagon Papers, which actually were a nice narrative history you could read. This is just a bunch of documents that are very hard to interpret, which is why most people tend to work through the New York Times, the Guardian, or Der Spiegel, because they've been processed. It doesn't appear to have changed anyone's position on the war. As I said, it's what people knew already. And I think the administration is correct. But when these documents end precisely at the point when President Obama may announce his new strategy, and his strategy is designed to address a lot of these problems, minimize civilian casualties, work to improve the U.S. image in Afghanistan and Pakistan, as well as draw them together, and take other steps to basically counter the problems that were identified. And that's what people are going to look at. And at the end of the year, has the extra troops, has the new strategy really made a difference? And at the end of the year, people will then make probably a reasoned judgment about whether this is the way to go or whether we need to make a change of course, and if so, what direction.
Well, Shukriya Barakzai in Kabul, do you think that the strategy being practiced by Obama needs to change? Are you hoping that this information may lead to a review of what the U.S. is doing in Afghanistan?
I hope so. I hope the new information, which is they got, particularly about the casualty, they should change the American mandate and strategy back in Afghanistan, because the civilian casualty is not anymore acceptable for us as Afghan, because we shouldn't take the life of the people under name and under flag of democracy back in Afghanistan. They are human and we have to protect them. At the meantime, I just want to raise a few other issues, because only strategy may not help. We need loyal, committed partners for that war, not those partners which is on one hand they are making enemy, on the other side they're standing as a friend to us and they want to shake our hand. And I think as long as there's a double policy, particularly in our neighbor countries and especially on the Pakistan side, I think there will be no success through to the US force or through to the...
हम लोग स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ लिविंग ऊंचा नहीं करते, स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ मैन ऊंचा करते हैं। हम जरूरतें पूरी नहीं करते, हम डिजायर्स पे नहीं लड़ते, हम नीड्स अपनी पूरी करते हैं। अल्लाह ने जो जरूरत पूरी करनी कर ली, ख्वाहिशात नफ्स के पीछे नहीं मरे। इन लोगों का हम हैरान होते हैं ना, हैरान नहीं होते हो कि हुक्मरानों के पास इतनी दौलतें हैं कि 10 नस्लें में खाते जाएं तो खत्म ना हो, फिर भी हराम खाने से बात नहीं आती। कुरान ने इनकी सिर्फ बयान किया, अल्हाकुमुत तकासुर हत्ता ज़ुरतुमुल मक़ाबिर, गफलत में रखा तुमको कसरत की हवस ने, हत्ता कि तुम कब्रों में पहुंच गए। ये बस नहीं कर सकते। हमें वो नस्ल चाहिए जो भूखा रहना कबूल करे, खुद ही ना बेच, गरीबी में नाम पैदा करे। तो बेटा ये करना है काम। इसके लिए कोई लंबे चौड़े वजीफे नहीं करने, कोई उसके लिए लंबे चौड़े कोर्सेज नहीं करने। नियत का सवाल है। मालिक आज के बाद हराम नहीं खाएगा, नियत है। मालिक आज के बाद आपके अलावा किसी से खौफ नहीं खाएगा, तौहीद है। लोग यहाँ पे शिर्क का क्या मतलब समझते हैं? सूद और रिबा के निजाम में रहते हैं जिसके साथ अल्लाह उसके रसूल की जंग। डेमोक्रेसी और जमहूरियत पे जाने निकाल रहे हैं एक दूसरे की। जंग है अल्लाह रसूल की सूद और रिबा के निजाम के साथ। पाकिस्तान की रूहानी और नजरियाती असास की जड़ काटी जा रही है, हमें सेकुलर लादीब बनाया जा रहा है। बहस इस बात पे हो रही है कि जमहूरियत होनी चाहिए या डिक्टेटरशिप होनी चाहिए। जहन्नुम में जाएं दोनों। हमें अपनी रूहानी और नजरियाती असास चाहिए, हमें तकमील पाकिस्तान चाहिए, हमें यह खिलाफत रास्ता का निज़ाम चाहिए। हमने गज़वा हिंद की तैयारी कर ली, हमने यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ इस्लाम बनाना है, एक हो मुस्लिम हरम की पासबानी के लिए। हमारे क्या मुसलमान मिल्लत के मसाइल क्या हैं, इनके मसाइल क्या हैं जो हमारे सो कॉल्ड लीडर बने। बेटा इस तरह काम नहीं मामला चलेगा। जब तक इकबाल ने सिर्फ बता दी लीडर की, जाली खुदा मत तलाश करो, जो बात हमने कही लीडर की सिर्फ इकबाल ने बता दी। निगाह बुलंद होगा, सुखन दिल नवाज होगा, जापुर तो उसके पास निगाह भी होगी, उसकी बात से तुमको तुम्हारे दिल पे असर भी होगा, रूहानी वजूद होगा, यानी अल्लाह का वली होगा। ये लीडर है। इसको इकबाल ने कहा है कि इस तरह की जमहूरियत तुम लाते हो, ऐसा लीडर आता है तो रूहानी जमहूरियत तुम ला सकते हो, वरना ये जमहूरियत पलीत है। इस जमहूरियत के अंदर सबसे पलीत जो होता है वो ऊपर आता है।
जैसा कोई नजर आ रहा है हमारे यहाँ
एक बात याद रखिए,
कोई फर्द या गिरोह या
आपको बताते हैं,
ये भी
आपको बताते हैं। देखिए एक बात याद रखिए,
रहनुमाई फरमाएं,
आपको पूरी तफसील बता देते हैं। अल्लाह ताला की सुन्नत समझ लीजिए किस तरह काम करेगा। जैसे उसने पाकिस्तान किस तरह बनाया था, घुप अंधेरा था, अल्लाह ताला ने अल्लामा इकबाल को 1930 में पहले इनकी ज़बान से खुशखबरी निकाली कि मुल्क तोड़कर, पूरा बर-ए-आज़म तोड़कर मुल्क बनाएंगे। पहले निगाह थी, یہ بتا دیا کہ تمہارا مقصد کیا ہے, تم نے ملک بنانا. پھر لوگوں نے کہا قوم نہیں ہے جو یہ ملک بنائے گی. کہتے قوم بھی میں تیار کرتا ہوں. پھر اپنی شاعری سے آگ لگائی, قوم تیار کی. پھر لوگوں نے کہا لیڈر نہیں ہے. انہوں نے کہا تم مقصد اپنا طے کرو, قوم تیار کرو, لیڈر اللہ بھیجے گا. اس وقت تک 1932 تک